class, we're going to get started today on some explanation for Chapter 4, and hopefully this will help you in completing Lab 4.1 that's assigned for this week. So in your chapter, it talks about the different types of data and variables that are in data sets. And for the Lab 4.1 that you are completing this week, it asks you to take a look at, let me pull up, ask you to take a look at the CHF data set. And you see we have a data set here, and across the top, line 1 is going to be your variable labels. And then each column provides information for those variables. So as we look at this data set, there is a couple of things that I want you to understand about the data set that we are looking at. Column A is identified as patient, and that information basically is just the patient numbers, how they are grouped in this data set. Column B is our length of stay. So this is the number of days the patient stayed in the hospital. We've looked at length of stay when we were looking at our calculating statistics information in the beginning. Column C is age, and this is something that you really do need to understand, is that column C, column D, column I and J are all what's known as coded variables. So if you'll take a look, patient number 1 has a length of stay of 8 days and age of 4. Age of 4 is not the actual age of the patient. We have a data dictionary that is uploaded into course content. If you look at the data dictionary information, you will see that age is a coded variable, and so 4 is categorizing that patient's age in a specific range. So you need to take a look at the data dictionary so that you're aware. Pull it over here so you can see it a little bit. So I've uploaded a PDF file into course content that includes the data dictionary. It's actually an assignment that you all don't complete in the class, but it's the information that you need to be able to understand what those coded variables are. So age is a coded variable. The beneficiary's age is computed as of the day of admission, and it is calculated from the Julian date of birth. So here, if we have a patient in our data set that shows an age of 4, we know they are between the ages of 65 and 69. That's going to be important information to us in the future, but just note that that's how that information is denoted. 1, if it shows a 1 in the age range, we know that they're less than 25, and so on. Another coded variable in your data set is gender. So whether they're male or female. Again, it's a coded variable, so if it's a 0, it's unknown. If it's a 1, it's a male. If it's a 2, it's a female. And then here we're also looking at, I'm going to make this a little bit larger. We're looking at field column I, which is noted as admission source. And here we have whether it was an invalid, which means they don't really know, whether it was a physician referral, a clinic referral, an HMO referral, transfer from another hospital, transfer transfer from a skilled nursing facility, transferred from another healthcare facility, if it was an emergency room admit, those kinds of things. Those are denoted there. Those are coded variables, 0, it looks like, to 9. And then something we're going to be looking at in the lab this week is the discharge destination. Where was that patient discharged to? This is column J. And if you'll notice, there's lots of different numbers in here, 0, 6, 1, 1. So if we look at the data dictionary, if it is coded as a 0, 1, that means they were discharged to home. 0, 2, discharged or transferred to another short-term care. 03, discharged or transferred to a skilled nursing. And the one that we will be looking at specifically for this lab is if the patient is expired. So if the patient died, the discharge status would be death. Okay, so that's all of the data dictionary. What I would suggest is the data dictionary is something you're going to refer back to through many of the labs that we do throughout the rest of the semester. So I would suggest downloading it from course content and saving it, so it's a quick reference for you. Okay, and then the last column is our MSDRG code, Medicare Severity Diagnosis Related Grouping. And this is something we're going to use throughout the lab. We're going to use it to separate our patients out and look at information. So back to our lab. Question number 1, or item number 1 on your lab, is determining the variable type for each of our variables. So here we have variables A through K, and you need to tell me what those variable types are. In the lab instructions, I tell you to use the variable scale decision tree on page 4 of your textbook. I would say pages 4 and 5 should be your reference. You need to tell me if that variable is nominal, ordinal, interval, or scale. Or ratio for all the variables in your sample set. I don't want you to upload your Excel document as your assignment. I want you to copy and paste everything that you need into the Word document and submit that. When you upload an Excel file for your submission, it makes it very difficult for me to know what your answers are and what the work is that you've done. So that's for the first portion of your lab. The second portion of your lab is creating some descriptive statistics, and we're going to use Excel to do this. So we are going to create some pivot tables with the variables as rows and count of patients. We need to know how those patients are split between those coded variables. So you should create 5 different pivot tables for each one of these. So what I found in the past is most students are unfamiliar with how to create pivot tables. We will use pivot tables throughout the rest of the semester. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial of how to create a pivot table and what information you need in that pivot table for this specific portion of the assignment. What I would suggest to you is Google or YouTube examples of how to create pivot tables and practice. Like I said, I will show you how to do the first couple for this portion of the assignment, but it will be your responsibility to know how to create a pivot table and how to manipulate the information within your pivot table. Okay, so and for this portion of the assignment, we're wanting to see how the data spreads for a specific variable. So we are looking at admission source and the number of patients per admission source. Remember, admission source, every single one of these are coded variables. So the information that's in our data set represents some kind of information. For admission source, it was where they were admitted from. Were they admitted from the ER? Were they transferred from another hospital? How were they admitted to the hospital? Data set. The first thing I would suggest you guys do is to freeze the top row. Click View. Over here in the middle, it says Freeze Panes, and I want to freeze the top row. That way, as I scroll through my data set, it's always going to tell me what that information is. This is really helpful anytime your data set is larger than what you can fit on your screen. Okay, so we're going to go back to Home, and we're going to go to Insert, and over here on the left, it shows Pivot Table, and it automatically thinks it knows what I want a pivot table of. This just highlighted my top row, but I want to actually drag it all the way down, and I want the entire data set. Okay. And it's going to show the selected table or range. I want it in a new worksheet. That way it's kind of cleaner and easier for me to use it. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, and if you'll notice what happens here is on the right hand side, it gives me basically a toolbar for the information that I have. And if you remember on our instructions, it says we're creating a frequency distribution for the following variables. It tells me what variables. In the instructions down at the bottom, this portion is best accomplished by using a pivot table with the variable as the row and the count of patients, patient ID as the values. So I am going to go back, and I want admission source, so I'm going to scroll through here as my row, and you'll see the admission sources are 1 through 7. And then my patient ID, so which is my patient numbers, it's going to come right here. And what it automatically does is it automatically sums that information. So if I click on it, it's going to give me some options here. I want to change the value fields, so I'm going to click Value Field Setting. And I want, remember, the instruction said count. I want to know the number of patients per each admission source. And I'm going to click OK. And here we see we have a grand total of 390 patients in our data set. They are spread, this is how they're spread out throughout the admission sources. And in your textbook on page 62, it actually shows you a frequency table for patient gender. As an example, you can do, we could also do the percentages. So here we would create a formula. You start a formula with an equal sign. Divide by this. So we took the total number of patients that are in admission source 1 and divided that by the grand total. And we see that that's 36%. And you can change that to a percent. And we could do that for each. divided by, and our total. This one's going to be small because there's only 2 patients in there, right? And we're going to do percent, and it's 1%. And these should actually all total 100% if you would keep going. This pivot table that we've created, this will be, you'll need to right click, copy, and go back to our Word document. And we can paste it in there. This is how I want you to, submit this portion of the assignment. So you'll need to go now. The first one was admission source. Now we're looking at gender. So now what we want to do, we're going to remove this information, and we're going to go, if you click in the pivot table, it's going to bring you up the pivot table fields again. So remember, we just, we're going to put this back. Okay, so now we have a blank pivot table again. This time we're looking at gender, so we're looking at sex, rows. We know 1 and 2. We must have no zeros, unknowns in our data set. So we know 1s are males and 2s are females. And then remember, we're going for patient information. And of course, it sums that information. Summing that information doesn't tell us anything. We're going to change the value field. We're going to go to count, and we're going to click OK. So now, once again, we know the total number of patients we have is 390. We have 198 patients that are male, 192 that are female. This is your pivot table that you'll need to use for number 2. Again, copy and paste that into the Word document. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover in this lecture. What you'll need to do is there will be at least one more recorded lecture to help you with sections 3 and 4 for the lab. I'm hoping by making them shorter that it'll be easier for you to grasp the information and then go back and watch the portions that you need. If you have additional questions, just let me know. You can send me an email or give me a call, and I will help you through the process.